In the Bette Midler Hocus Pocus movies, the Sanderson sisters like to eat children because they are witches and need the souls of children to live long and stay young. It's based on a lot of typical stories about witches luring young children to be tortured and eaten by malevolent crones in league with Satan. Now, in the movies, it's not all that violent. The kid has to drink a weird potion, which makes them glow in the dark, and then the witches suck out their soul, a bit like smoking a bong. Yeah, okay, so that doesn't sound a whole lot better. But what was the point of all those legends that inspire Hollywood? To scare kids to listen to their parents? Instill stranger danger? And why children? Today, we're going to find out that the origins to these legends have much darker implications. This is The Devil You Don't Know.
So how are all y'all?
Hi.
Holy crap, we're doing this.
We're doing it now.
Damn.
It's been a while. Yeah. A hot minute.
Yeah.
Or a cold minute. Would a hot minute be fast and a cold minute be like extended?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. I stumped you both.
Yeah. I still want to draw a hot minute to hell somehow, but I don't know how. I don't have it connected yet.
There's got to be a phrase in there somewhere.
Because how can you have hotter than hell and colder than hell and it mean the same?
Well, hell has frozen over for a cold minute.
Oh, look at you. Look at you. This is the Devil You Don't Know podcast, where we take a historical and cultural look at the devil. And so I'm Don, your host. We have Emily.
Hello.
And Jeremy.
Hey, that's me.
And so, guys, remember when we did the Zoroastrianism?
Yeah, that was a while ago. Yes, I remember.
And how we had been kind of leading up to that episode. There'd been a lot of things that just led up to, I wanted to get to that episode because it established.
Yeah, we had to start with kind of defining evil. And then defining how the world saw evil and the different changes that were made. And then the Zoroastrianism was where we really started seeing entities, right? Representations of evil and good.
That's right. Yeah. This episode here is what I have been kind of deciding to drive to, like, the next level. This episode is something that I've been building towards on the topic of the consequences of belief, and the consequences of a shared reality that can be super destructive.
Herd mentality.
Mm-hmm. And this is also episode 20.
Ooh, wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, good for us.
Really?
And it's also going to be our 1-year anniversary episode.
Get out of here.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Look at us and all of our accomplishments.
Yay.
I didn't get you anything, but
I didn't get you anything either.
Did you? You totally got him something. You have a devil-headed pen holder, don't you, Don?
Oh, I do. I do.
Yeah.
I can't show it on camera because this is an audio podcast, but I do have this, and I got it from Emily and Matt Vancel and Jeff Miles, and I love it. And it is very creepy. It is a baby doll's head.
It's really creepy.
That's red glass with devil horns coming out. And
the three of us were walking around the night market and we stopped at this booth where they had these and we're just like, Dawn. Dawn needs this.
And what a fantastic find for
and
the
Sophie
night
all
market.
pitched in money to get that for him. So I totally forgot about that.
Such a good idea. And like, if I was ever going to go to a night market, that is the type of things I would expect to find at a place called the night market. Like, nowhere else. Like, where are you going to find a glass baby doll head that's made out of the devil or devil's thighs? Like, well, you're going to go to the night market for that, obviously.
Right, obviously.
It's fun. It's a
it is a
place.
glass cup, so you can drink cold or lukewarm beverages, but it specifically in the instructions said no hot beverages. So,
for you will call up the flames of death.
And burn thine hand.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you like it.
Thank you. No, I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And it sits on my desk. It has blush brushes.
I was going to say, are
those
those
what it looked like.
makeup brushes in there? Okay.
But this is not for my makeup, which I don't have, but it is for dusting my Transformers. So thank you very much.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's important.
It is important. I have a lot of them.
I feel like you gave
do have
him
lots of them.
The perfect thing to hold his dust brushes and just rolled your eyes at the fact that that's what he's using it for. So it's a little judgmental.
Okay.
Sorry. No judgment. No,
so you
no
have
judgment here.
Expectations of what I'm supposed to use your gift for. I see.
I mean, I would think that most people would see a cup and drink out of a cup, not hold makeup brushes for dusting children's toys. But I mean, go ahead, do what you would like to do.
I'm going to.
You have my permission.
Thank you. Some housekeeping to set expectations of what's coming forward. We did a really, really fun collaborative episode with the podcast The Dispatchist, which is a podcast about hell. And they did a really fun, it was their, I think, 50th episode. And they decided to have Jeremy and I on. You were in Burbank at the time, yeah.
Yeah.
And they did this really fun tournament of Satan's kind of thing. So I'm really excited for you because we did a sort of a gimme with each other saying, okay, we're going to do this one episode and then keep it kind of agnostic for the podcast so that we can both use the episode as an episode in our own respective podcasts.
Oh, right on.
So that will be next after this. And I'm thinking of a couple of ideas on doing more things like that, like, Satan in the movies or music or something like that. Got a couple of thoughts there. And then in November, I have a great, awesome interview / collaboration kind of planned with the Pontifex podcast, which is a podcast about popes. And they do a historical deep dive in popes. And they have I've mentioned them on the podcast before. They have like a rating system for their popes, and they have a lot of fun with it. So we've been talking about who's the most anti-Satan pope or who's the Satanistic type pope, or, we'll figure it out, but it'll be fun.
Cool.
So that's what I have going on. If you want to get the inside scoop, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedevilpodcast, where you get new ideas, new content, fuller episodes before they get released, and so on and so forth. So you can want to join us there. You'll join our Discord server, and you can be a sounding board for future ideas as well. So tune in there. And so today's episode has been a long time coming. This episode is about QAnon, the Satanic Panic, and this weird conspiracy theory called the blood libel, which a lot of people may be familiar with the Satanic Panic from the 80s and 90s. QAnon is still in the news every now and again. It's
I have to tune it out.
It's so weird.
I can't listen about it. So
yeah.
So we're going to go into the blood libel. This is going to be building up to. So I want to get this right. This is what we've been building up to. Is this episode, or this is going to be the start of another build up to a new content?
We've been kind of building up to this because the whole point that I've been when we started this podcast, I talked about how it was born out of when I was watching an episode of Lucifer, right? And just the topic of lore sort of came up, and Sydney was asking me about that, and I was like, I'm not sure. And then sort of jumped down the rabbit hole of researching that lore, and I'm like, oh my God, there's a lot, and I want to know more, and I don't think I'm going to get tired of this anytime soon. And one of the things that I recall from my childhood was the Satanic Panic. Yeah. And it wasn't like super firsthand for me growing up. It was really more of like my parents' belief, or really my mom's belief about certain things that were out there. But I definitely remembered the topics on the news broadcasts, you know, and things that come up, and the Geraldo Rivera special, and which we'll talk about a little bit later.
God, I remember that one.
I don't remember this.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it existed, but like, when did that start? Like early 80s? So
I'm going to get into that.
I'm sure we'll get into that, but I was born in 79, and so like those were very, very early years. And even when I got older, it wasn't something that really like directly touched into my life. It just was maybe like a side thing. And so, well, this affects me in no way whatsoever. So didn't really pay attention to it. And
I mean, consider yourself totally blessed in that regard, because it is terrible.
Yeah, it sounds like a witch hunt.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
The actual, honest to God.
Oh, a witch hunt against children.
A witch hunt against witches. Like that it's born in the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a content warning. I imagine we're probably going to need to do this a few times on our show, but this one in particular, I do want to say that we're going to talk about some things that are graphic and uncomfortable, and they involve children. And so if that's not something that you want to listen to, that's fine.
And we get it.
I do want to
turn off.
I would like to add the caveat that it's all false. The information that we're talking about is fictional violence towards children. And that's kind of where it comes from a little bit. But like, just want to point that out there, that like, we're going to talk about the real attacks that people were accused of, but no one was ever actually doing this.
Except the first part that I'm going to talk about, which is the blood libel.
Okay.
Right. And if you do decide to stop and turn this off, we totally get it, because it is hard to stomach even thinking about and imagining what's going to be described against children.
Absolutely.
So no judgment.
The real, I guess, sinister part about the whole thing is that that's on purpose. Because how universal is the parents' fear for the welfare of their children and to protect them from really dastardly shit.
Absolutely.
You would do anything.
Anything. And that universal condition of being a parent is what feeds into this, and people specifically target it, and they specifically exploit that for their own gain.
The blood libel.
Here we go.
What are the claims about the blood libel? What is this conspiracy anyway? The blood libel is the idea that the Jews abduct children, Christian children, and ritually kill them, specifically to drain their blood and consume it. The Jews, mind you, abduct Christian children to ritually drain their blood, killing them. Oftentimes the ritual was reenacting the crucifixion of Christ, and that it is said that the Jews were said to suffer maladies of the blood, and that only Christian blood could cure them of it.
It's so absurd.
Right. Like, are you going to explain it real quick? Because, like, my mind's already reeling. And we've done this. I've looked into this.
Yeah. I think let's set the stage for a little bit of how the fuck is it possible for anyone to have believed this? Not just, I mean, because let's just get it right out there that we'll get into this in a second, but this solidified in the 1100s, all right, into something that was widespread, okay? But beliefs about this idea certainly date much older. And so let's give a little bit of context on this. So there is a YouTube video in the show links called Blood Exhibition. Dr. I'm going to butcher this name, and I think he's Scottish. McLahouse. McLahouse.
Can you spell that for me? That's amazing.
I'm not sure. MacLehose. McLahouse. I'm not sure. We'll figure it out. On early ideas about blood and Jewish ritual. So again, there's a show link there on this, and take it as you will. You don't have to take this as fact or whatnot. There are other supporting, things that can build on this, but they brought up some very interesting points. So this goes back to the 400 BCE approximately. Okay. And it's the idea of the four humors. You guys are familiar with at least the notion of the four humors, or what humors are, these
like ichor and
substances within the body. And it was an attempt to explain why one is healthy and one is unhealthy. And it was thought that when the four humors are balanced, then we are healthy, and when they are in imbalance, we are unhealthy. And this is all like Hippocratic stuff, like going way, this is old Greek ideas, which did not originate with Greek. But anyway, so the four humors, what are they? The humors are blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. So that's gross. Yeah. The notion develops over time that by the four humors, or that the four humors can be identified with four personality types or temperaments, depending on which humor is more dominant. So the predominance of blood has a sanguine temperament and is the most healthy. Blood is, of course, thought of as the most powerful, or the strongest. Too much yellow bile are choleric, and so they are fiery and angry. Too much phlegm are, you guessed it, phlegmatic. And considered lazy, sluggish, and fairly pessimistic.
Did not ever put together that phlegmatic is related to phlegm as one of the humors.
Yeah.
That's intense.
That's intense. And I mean, I don't know. Phlegm is just mucus and grossness. I would never have thought of
phlegmatic.
But I guess when you're a lot of phlegm, you're sluggish and don't want to do much. I get that.
It also explains why I have spelled phlegmatic wrong my entire life. Because I've never thought of it as phlegm being the root of that word.
Yeah. Phlegm. So.
I want to pronounce it phonetically from now on. It's phlegm.
Phlegm. And then finally, we have those associated with black bile, which are considered melancholic. These are also associated with elements of the body that can be manipulated in order to retain balance, such as bloodletting and diet and so on. Blood is seen as the most powerful and the most important and the most healthy, while black bile is seen as blood's opposite. Black bile is seen as a source of weakness, a source of emotional fragility, particularly around fear and anxiety. And black bile is seen as a source of antisocial behavior. In other words, not wanting to belong to society. You can kind of see where this is going. Certain groups then are, of course, associated with different humors. And Jews are associated with black bile.
Black bile.
And
I get it.
As such are associated with anxiety, sadness, fear, and antisocial behavior because they shun society. Wonder why? The much shit that they had to gone through,
yeah. It's not black bile nearly as much as it's horrible other people.
Yeah, maybe oppression might be more
maybe
accurate.
that, yeah.
Anyway, this next one still slays me. There is an uncommon idea, but an occasional idea, that the Jewish male menstruates.
What now?
Yeah. Okay, so Jewish males are seen to be colder, and so the Jewish male body needs to remove fluid as a woman's body does. Because, women are cold all the time. Of course they got to bleed.
This is all pre-science.
Oh, yeah.
Right? This is okay.
400, we're probably dealing with 400 on to 0 BCE, ish. I also kind of wonder if it's just around this Christian notion, because again, by the time the Christians sort of develop these really bizarre ideas around Jewish males, they are mostly not Jews anymore, right? It's been Gentiled or paganized or, whatever you want to call it. The dominant body of people were no longer converted Jews.
Right, yeah, it was, right, we talked about that.
Yeah.
It was determined that the Jews were not the target market at this point.
So we have these pagan, from pagan backgrounds or Gentiles that are predominantly Christian. That's their world is more pagan than not. So as a result, the men are not going to be circumcised. Right. That's not really going to be part of their thing. And so the notion that you would mutilate yourself and mutilate babies for that matter, ritually, and do these wounds fester? Do they continue to bleed or, I don't know. It's just, it's these questions that seem foreign to thoughts of othering. It gets weird. So here's the philosophical or the rationale that they develop. The occurrence is seen as a consequence of the crucifixion, a curse upon the Jews who did not accept Jesus. So the Christians then claimed that the cure for this was supposed to be the blood of Christ itself, the conversion to Christianity and then taking the Eucharist. Taking communion. And then Christian writers argue that the Jews misinterpreted this idea and just claimed that the consumption of any Christian blood would cure them of this condition. Yeah.
The condition again being?
Jewish male menstruation.
So they wanted to not be cold again, so that they would stop menstruating, so that they would drink Christian blood.
Blood, yeah.
To cure or balance out the black bile that they have primarily in their system. Is that right?
Yeah. So, this is
so
all...
was it the melancholy condition they were trying to fix, or it was the menstruating they were trying to fix?
It was an affliction of the blood. However you want to think of it, it was a...
Because I did not know that I could stop my period by just wrapping myself up in a blanket and not being cold anymore. I feel lied to all these years.
Yeah.
Because that would have saved me years of 5 to 7 days each month.
Just consume the blood of Christian babies and
being
you would
pissed
be fine.
off and miserable.
So, anyway, really, really strange concepts here. But you can see, given the 19 previous episodes of everything that we've learned and the context that we've kind of seen, how this, this Christian worldview, Christian notion, looking at the Jews because the Jews killed Christ and finding those ways to make them alien.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that extreme othering that's there.
Yeah. Mind you, that consuming blood of any kind is completely against Jewish worldview and religion and kosher
That's what
laws.
they want you to think, Don. They want you to think that they can't consume blood.
Don,
that way they can hide it.
Stop drinking the Kool-Aid here. Come on.
Right.
But you're not wrong, right? That's part of what the kosher level is.
Exactly.
Is literally no blood in anything.
Yeah. Kosher meat is salted and preserved in such a way to extract as much of blood as possible. And again, this is in one of the videos I have linked down below that kind of goes into more detail, just how bizarre this notion is that you would put this on the Jews when it's very clear that their tradition and their laws and whatnot are completely antithetical to this. It goes without saying that, as bananas as it sounds, it is that. It's complete cobblers. It's absolute fabrication. You can see the projection from one dominant society onto a people. You can see the projection. But where this gets tricky, there's an element of this that leads credence to it, and that is in the notion of the Jewish insider. The Jewish person who has come over from the dark side of Judaism to Christianity to tell you the secrets of Judaism, of what they're really doing, and that this is absolutely true, and that sort of thing. That is a key element to these conspiracy theories to lend itself credence.
So someone just comes over and says, "Oh yeah, I used to be Jewish." Haha. And then just makes up all the shit.
I totally involuntarily eye rolled when you were just talking about the insider, Dom, because not from the Jewish culture, but I have seen this happen in my lifetime from the Satanic Temple or the heavy metal life. And I'm sure we'll get into that in a second, but I'm like, oh, I've heard this.
Yep.
I've heard a lot of this.
Yeah. All right. So I would say the earliest and potentially most famous, or at least second most famous, idea of this concept of the blood libel occurs in 1144 in Norwich, England. The traditional origin story of the conspiracy occurs on Good Friday in 1144, where the body of a young boy named William was found dead with stab wounds. He was found in the forest. Okay, so most of what is known about this boy named William comes from Thomas of Monmouth, who is a monk from Norwich, from the Norwich Benedictine monastery, who wrote a multi-volume work in Latin called The Life and Miracles of St. William of Norwich. And the Wikipedia article honestly has plenty of information on this. I'm going to kind of read from some of it because a lot of my other research have kind of supported the summary that's on here, so I feel pretty good about it. So bear in mind, the writings about what happened came from this monk who had his own agenda. Okay. That's clear. And The historians are clear about that, but it's also the only information that we have around that. There is some evidence that they've been trying to kind of piece together to corroborate and support, but what we have is what we have. So the story goes that William was born on the 2nd of February, 1132, to a local couple and was apprenticed to a skinner and tanner of hides who often dealt with the local Jews. Shortly before his murder, William's mother was approached by a man who claimed to be a cook working for the Archdeacon of Norwich. He offered William a job in the Archdeacon's kitchens. William's mother was paid 3 shillings to let her son go. William later visited his aunt in the company of this man. His aunt was apparently suspicious and asked his daughter to follow them after they left, and they were seen entering the house of a local Jew. And this is the last time William was seen alive, which was on Holy Tuesday. On Holy Saturday, we're going from Tuesday to Saturday, 12-year-old William's body was found in a part of Thorpewood outside of Norwich. Now, the sources get a little bit dodgy around what happens next. Wikipedia is going to describe that a local nun saw the body, but then did not initially contact anyone. And then a forester named Henry de Sprouston then came across it. He noted injuries which suggested a violent death, and William was wearing a jacket and shoes, is notated. It is later determined by other sources, other later sources, I think, that he was wearing only a jacket and shoes. After consultation with the parish priest, it was decided to bury the body on Easter Monday. In the meanwhile, local people came by to look at it, and William was recognized. The body was then buried at the murder site, and then the following day, members of his family, whom one was the priest Godwin Stewart, arrived to confirm the identity of the body. They exhumed it and then reburied it with a proper ceremony. There's a lot of weird events happening here. And in other accounts, the initial nun who discovered the body is left out. It was said it was discovered by the forester, Henry, this Henry guy.
Yeah, I can't imagine a nun seeing the body of a child and just,
and like,
still gonna just go on my way, whatever.
We don't know
for sure.
We don't know why that part of the story exists, but it's part of the way it was accounted. I don't know.
Usually, and I could be wrong in this, but when I have seen, based on the things that we've talked about, as well as some other times, there is context that is created in characters that are being introduced or people that are not being introduced when stories are done, right? Pagel's talked about that a lot, but how the context was created for different topics. This might be one of those situations.
Yeah. William's family and their fellow English people quickly blamed the local Jewish community for the crime and demanded justice from the ecclesiastical court of Bishop William de Turbeville, not Turdville, Turbeville.
That's disappointing.
I know. Members of the Jewish community were asked by the bishop to attend the court and submit to a trial by ordeal, but the local Norman sheriff, John de Chesney, advised them that the ecclesiastical court had no jurisdiction over them, as they were not Christians. He then took the Jews into protection in Norwich Castle. So I think a little bit of context now on the background of the Jewish community and the makeup and what that looks like is in order. So the Jewish community was thought to have settled in Norwich by 1135, and most lived in the Jewish quarter near the castle. And the Jewish quarter had an unfortunate nickname called the Jewry.
Oh, God.
And so the Jews were a French-speaking community, just as the Anglo-Normans were. and they were seen as under the protection of the Normans. William and his family, on the other hand, were of Anglo-Saxon descent, and several of his relatives were married priests, which followed local tradition. Long story short, there were tensions particularly high between the French-speaking Jews and, who were teamed up with thought to have been teamed up, or at least under the protection of the French-speaking Normans. And they were particularly high during the reign of King Stephen when the murder occurred. Thomas of Monmouth alleges that the sheriff was bribed by the Norwich Jewish community to protect them. After the situation had calmed down, they returned to their homes. The issue revived 2 years later when a member of the Jewish community was murdered in an unrelated incident, and Stephen agreed to look into the matter but decided later not to pursue it. So more unrest starts to come out. When William's body had been moved to the monks' cemetery, Bishop de Turbeville and other members of the local community attempted to create a cultus around him as a Christian martyr, but it didn't really plan out, and so it gets real murky as, you know.
They wanted to make a martyr out of William, the boy?
Yeah.
Wow.
And this is kind of the beginning of this notion that William was killed by the Jews, but why? And it ends up extrapolating this notion that he was killed for his blood, that he was stabbed, you know, to collect his blood, so that the Jews could consume it. This gets later propagated and validated, and other incidences of a similar nature start spreading around the mainland Europe within the next, I think, 10 years. So it really, in that time, that's a pretty fast-paced
absolutely
notion. And there's another, I don't have it off the top of my head. We're not going to get into it, but there are other very famous murders that are thought to be, again, similar situations, sainted, martyred, but that the Jews abducted them, killed them, drained them of their blood. There is horrible, horrible artwork out there on what this looks like.
And it's always Jews, right?
It's always Jews.
It's no one else.
Yeah.
Wow.
So obviously Christians in power benefited from this, and the consequences of this conspiracy spread like wildfire, vividly embraced throughout the Nazi regime, of course. There are some terrible anti-Semitic paraphernalia and cartoons of this happening that came out of the Nazi area. And even to this day, even as recent as 2020, the Italian artist Giovanni Gasparo paints an uber-realistic and graphic portrayal of the blood libel conspiracy of the murder of Simon of Trent, who is the other one I couldn't think of the name of, but that's Simon of Trent is this other very famous blood libel conspiracy victim.
Was he another child?
Yeah. So the consequences, of course, have been violent anti-Semitism. And
of course, if you believed that this is what they were actually doing.
Yeah. And this is...
how could you believe that?
Right?
It's so ridiculous.
What it gets me thinking about is, and I was thinking about this earlier, Don, when you were talking about how fast it spread. Like all of Europe and the word of mouth, it's not a lot of printed presses out there, people reading news in the 1100s. But it takes me back to a book that I read that really kind of changed my entire adult perspective. I read it in my 20s from an author called Terry Goodkind. The book is called Wizard's First Rule. And the wizard's first rule is that people are stupid. Specifically, people are stupid, and they will believe anything that you tell them because A, they want it to be true so badly that they will believe it, or B, they are terrified that it is true. And so they will choose to believe these incredibly absurd, absolutely outrageous, like one person sitting there realizing it, as we would sit here and go, no, that doesn't make sense. There's nothing, like, you can point to it 300 ways that doesn't make sense. But because I would be so afraid of my child being injured or being wounded or being attacked, or because I have so much vitriol and hate that I wanted so bad to have revenge on that one, that I could believe these incredible lies to be true.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's the wizard's first rule. I think that's how it's
I haven't
read.
heard of that before, but that's, I
makes
can see that fitting many, many, many situations.
Right? Over and over again.
That
Like
makes
up to current day.
current day. Yeah. And again, current day, this conspiracy I just talked about is still believed by many people out there.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's in there's news articles. Again, I referenced this one from even just 2020 where this person painted this picture. It's one thing, not only has it been debunked and thoroughly shown to be complete lies, falsehoods, and a construct, and the reasons for that construct.
Yeah.
It's still taken as real, as reality, as truth, because I mean, I'm not sure that I like this notion of that people are stupid, but I do think that there's I like the element of the wizard's first rule that some people are disposed to believe things because they want it to be true so badly, or that they are so terrified that it could be true. I think those two ideas are very reality changing notions for anyone.
And to keep the philosophy thoughts going, I'm going to take a quote from Men in Black.
Right.
Very, very
I was going to say
film.
that comes up too.
Right? Yeah, a person is smart and can figure things out, but people are dumb, panicky animals.
Yeah.
Right? And you know it, says Kay.
Right.
Like that's the thing, right? It's when you have a mass, when there is a mob mindset, there is no more critical thinking. There is no more decision making around that.
Yeah.
Those who do are the minority because they're not speaking with the mob.
No, the one thing that we're not going to get into because we don't have time, but because we're going to skip right to the 80s and 90s now. But this does, of course, bleed into the Inquisition and the witch trials. It's very, very similar othering and notions of why these people are doing horrible things is they need the blood of Christian children for their nefarious rituals.
So it's actually the same conspiracy that fueled those investigations as well, or at least those justifications for those horrific acts.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wild.
So it ends up becoming like, well, this was anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. Now we're going to go after women. And so we have that whole bit.
Yeah.
Yay.
Right.
And of course, all of that have completely obviously been as well debunked and disproven. But what maybe isn't real clear to a lot of people is the Satanic Panic and what that was, and that the fact that it was also false. And what may be difficult to understand about that is that it was so real at the time. The conspiracy was so pervasive that it convinced people who weren't even religious. It convinced people that there was a threat to their communities that was faceless. So there's a podcast by CBC called Satanic Panic. Highly, highly recommend you take a look at it. the summary of this sums up the Satanic Panic. Throughout the 1980s, satanic cults were widely believed to be preying on children, torturing and terrorizing them as part of dark rituals. Across North America, there were hundreds of false accusations and allegations, scores of unjust criminal trials, and countless lives torn apart, but never any real proof. By the early 1990s, the panic reached the tiny prairie town of Martinsville, Saskatchewan, in Canada, and nearly 30 years later, the people touched by it all are still picking up the pieces. So what happened, and why do so many people still believe this today? And so it's a podcast called Uncover Satanic Panic Investigates. Check that out. It is about the Martinsville, and it's a little confusing because there's another famous, which we'll talk about in a second, famous trial called the McMartins. So I kind of kept getting those
close.
two.
Yeah.
But the Martinsville happened in the 90s, and it was in Canada, whereas the McMartin trial was in Southern California. So what are the claims? The claims were that the satanic cults are hidden in plain sight, and they are seeking your children for ritual abuse. That the Satanists wish for anarchy and destruction, and they are overwhelmingly numerous and have infiltrated every level of society.
And they play D&D.
And they play D&D.
Right. And listen to heavy metal music, and everything is a ritual. Everything has a meaning. There is hidden language and hidden symbology everywhere, because all they're doing is abusing children and bringing demons into the world.
Yeah.
It's fucking gamers.
Nice quote. Nice quote. You sounded just like her.
I wonder why.
The Satanic Panic of the early 80s. I mean, there's a lot of context behind this, of course, but there was a phrase that was coined trying to uncover what was going on here, and that is the so-called satanic ritual abuse, or SRA, to the point that a manual was written to ferret out and deprogram and get the truth and to interrogate satanic ritual abuse, either suspects or victims or so on.
So, like, this was a law enforcement style manual that was used to interview victims or interrogate suspects.
Yep.
On specifically satanic ritual abuse. Yeah.
There is a U.S. Department of Justice creates a investigator's guide to allegations of ritual child abuse by
U.S. Department of Justice?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
The DOJ wrote this?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
1992.
I was going to say, do you know what year it was written? Wow.
Yeah, 1992. Kenneth Lanning writes it. There's a link, of course, in the show notes here. Our friends over at the Black Mass Appeal podcast did an episode in July of this year called Drunk Heresy, Ending the Satanic Panic. And they dive into FBI Special Agent Kenneth Lanning publishing his Investigator's Guide to Allegations to Ritual Child Abuse. Though many sources today credit Lanning with sinking the Satanic Panic, few have actually read his conclusions. So they're going to get to the bottom of that. And it's a pretty good episode. So you should definitely check that out. But yeah, it changed the country, right? Over a notion that no evidence was found, no cults were found, people were arrested and went to jail. Some are still in jail for things that never happened.
That's what gets me, that they're still in jail when everything has been debunked. I mean, literally lives ruined over this. And didn't it all start, sorry, spoiler alert, but didn't it all start with somebody who just made shit up in a book?
Yeah, we'll get to that. In the 60s and 70s, there's, again, this sort of pressure cooker that is building and building. And so there's a number of factors that increase to this mass fear and panic. We had in the late 60s and in the 70s, we had the Manson cult operation in the late 60s that culminated into a string of murders. Of course, Charles Manson didn't commit a single one of them.
Right.
He was just the sort of ringleader of this cult, but had that sort of satanic flavor to it, right?
Helter Skelter.
Yeah, Helter Skelter. In the same year, 1969, Anton LaVey published his philosophical treatise, The Satanic Bible, which many people say plagiarized several sources and mostly regurgitated earlier philosophies of self-actualization and self-empowerment from writers like H.L. Mencken and Ayn Rand.
Yep.
Nevertheless, it became the seminal work of modern Satanism and is the key text for the Church of Satan, as we have talked about many times, who LaVey founded in 1966. We've seen before that Anton LaVey was also a pretty public figure. He liked being a celebrity, and he dressed the part, right? Jeremy, you talk about that sometimes, about when he shows up on like talk shows and stuff.
Yeah, the dude was a ham. Like his entire shtick of the deal, even as you just talked about, right? The Satanic Bible has items and moments of self-actualization in there, but that wasn't really his goal. His goal was to be seen. It was narcissistic at best. And so when there was people that were giving him attention, he would do everything he could to maintain that attention. Like, oh, he's scary. Great. I'm going to dress scary. Yeah. Oh, he has black and red like a vampire. Great. I'm going to wear capes like a freaking vampire because that's going to be satanic. And he would just like embody this. And you know what? It worked for him.
It did.
He really did have that celebrity feature, even showed up in movies.
Yeah. Now it is, I've mentioned this before and I'm wrong and I need to correct this, that it was said that he appeared in Rosemary's Baby as the devil, and the devil in that movie rapes Rosemary and impregnates her. It was, actor in a bodysuit, in a creature suit, was not Anton LaVey. He was not in that. The Church of Satan would like you to believe it does, as far as I understand, but no, he was not associated with that.
Not his gig.
He would like to have been, but I don't. It sounds like that wasn't a thing. Anyway, that's 1969. Satanic Bible is published and it's out there. Now, accompanying this rise of Satanism as a recognized practice was the 1971 publication of the best-selling William Peter Blatty's novel, The Exorcist, which scared the shit out of generations.
Still does, probably.
Still does. And it's a blockbuster in 1973 film adaptation. With its claims of being based on a true story, it just profoundly impacts the American consciousness around Satanism.
Freaked the shit out of people.
To the point that it demonized the Ouija board. The whole idea that the Ouija board is a tool for the devil comes from that movie.
Whoa.
Wow.
According to this article from Vox that I'm reading from.
So that's my entire life right there, right? Ouija boards were always bad, were always scary. My mom was absolutely terrified of them.
Yeah.
The only thing she was scared more of than Ouija boards was tarot cards.
Yeah.
She considered it to be the same deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So apparently prior to The Exorcist, it was just a fun, harmless parlor game. And it became this malevolent device capable of inducing spirit possession and demonic infestation and everything else. So in 1972 came the publication Satan Seller, which was a fabricated memoir ultimately discredited after 20 years by the self-proclaimed Christian evangelist Mike Warnke. recounted childhood and young adult that Warkey claimed that he spent in intense satanic worship, and was part of ritualistic sex orgies and various other things, which, of course, LaVey was a big fan of as well.
Was that the book that you were referring to, Emily? Was that
No.
one? Oh, there's another one.
No, it was
We're building
it was
to
a
that
woman
one.
or
Oh my God.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not there yet.
I jumped way ahead.
You
Jeremy.
did. We're still in the 70s right now.
Okay.
LaVey published also in the same year, 1972, this Satanic Rituals, just reinforcing the idea of dark occult rituals that have become a part of ordinary American life for some reason. And then we get weird shit. Again, the sort of cult. There's the 1978 Jonestown Massacre, not really connected with Satanism, but it still sort of, cements this idea. We have, things like the Zodiac Killer and Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy, Hillside Stranglers, David Berkowitz, which of course is on Netflix, is that the Sons of Sam or Son of Sam documentary out there, David Berkowitz. That one very, very heavily suggests that there was a satanic cult ring. And here's the thing, maybe there were some people who were into some pretty heavy shit, and maybe they believed what they were saying, or who knows. But there's never been really any evidence to the, to the other.
But I mean, you bring up a really solid point. I'm thinking of like the media in the 70s, right? Like television has been around for a full generation at this point. So the kids that grew up with learning TV, they now get to see news consistently, and they are grown-ups at this time. So the word, like we were talking about the blood libel being spread around Europe in 10 years, 800 years ago, now it's the news all the time because that's where you get your information. Yeah. That's what you see. And the news that people tune into are the who killed someone else and other things happening. But I mean, good God, think of the amount of true crime shows that are out right now in the podcast. These are the true crimes real happening.
Yeah, everybody loves the holy shit type of news.
Yeah. And I mean, and this is you're right. The media had a huge impact in spreading this notion, these ideas, and painting that picture.
For sure, right? Having to tell the story.
And feeding the fear. The John Wayne Gacy was also kind of interesting. Sort of, he hid his evil under, like, the guise of friendly clowns, and then they somehow discover and find that he's got, over 20 bodies buried in his crawl space. And that one didn't really have anything to do with Satanism either, John Wayne Gacy.
No.
But it contributes. It's these serial killers, Ed Gaines, and these notions of how could anyone do such a horrible, atrocious thing? It must be the result of satanic forces or these sort of like violent cult situations. So this is
Wizard's first rule again.
This is all building. Yeah, Wizard's first rule, 100%. That's a really good one. Now we get to the 80s, and this is where M's book comes in. And
not my book.
The book that you're talking about. To set this up, we've got the Reagan era. We've got in the 80s, we're seeing the spread of the AIDS misinformation, kidnapped victims appearing on milk cartons all over the place, mass panic around the 1982 Tylenol murders, of course, the trick-or-treat scares, where there was only one candy killer, Ronald Clark O'Brien, who received a highly publicized execution in 1984. But we all still check for razor blades, don't we? And never accept fruit. By the way, they were giving a lot of packages of sliced fruit in Disneyland. Take that as we will. Sliced apples.
And grapes.
And grapes. Yeah. Not a single razor blade, mind you. I was disappointed.
Not in the happiest place on earth.
Yeah. The other thing that's happening that I don't think this article goes into too much, is the dual income family. Where the Satanic Panic podcast that I previously mentioned does go into that quite a bit, where the climate of moms and dad are working now.
And kids are home alone.
Kids are either home alone or they are needing to have daycare. So they're going to daycare. You're leaving your children with seemingly strangers. And so 80s starts building this stranger danger on an exponential level. And of course, it's the daycare centers that these conspiracies begin.
Yeah, of course.
Christian fundamentalism, the moral majority, Jerry Falwell on the huge rise. Jack Chick, the Jack Chick comics, of course, Dark Dungeons, which we're very familiar with in this group, the fire and brimstone of Christianity, and the rise in this understanding that Dungeons and Dragons is a tool of satanic cults and stuff. And where the conspiracy starts to coalesce is in this book published in 1980, a memoir called Michelle Remembers. And this book it's graphic and it's wild, and just even talking about it is really uncomfortable because it reveals this shocking occult sex abuse. What's even, I don't understand how it wasn't immediately discredited, in that the co-author was a controversial psychologist, Lawrence Pazder, who was Michelle's psychiatrist or psychologist, whom he married.
Yeah, that's a no-no.
That's like 5 conflicts of interest in one sentence.
Yeah.
He purportedly helped Michelle uncover memories of the past, abuse at the hands of members of the Church of Satan, which he insisted was older than LaVey's group by several centuries. This publication, Michelle Remembers, has been widely debunked thoroughly as Pazder's methods became incredibly not only just questionable, but obviously leading, but it also became kind of a guidebook on how to uncover these repressed memories in the victims. The phrase satanic ritual abuse, SRA, is coined. And Michelle Remembers gets presented as a textbook for legal professionals and other authorities. And there are other copycat novels that are well, might as well be novels, but other books that get pushed as truth. And, and then we've got the talk shows and all of the repercussions. Geraldo Rivera and Oprah Winfrey having, Satanism and cults on the rise, just completely out there. For those who are stay-at-home moms at the time, they're watching the daytime TV, and you just get all of that. And so more and more of this stranger danger and panic that everyone's out for your kids. And
I can't believe, like, when you were describing the fact that SRA was coined in this book, I was really hoping it to come back and go, but they used a different source, not this was the textbook for the actual department policies and procedures that were written. That is now debunked. Like, that is so intensely stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. So the cases began in Kern County in California in 1980. Bakersfield social workers who had read Michelle Remembers learned of a clandestine local occult sex ring from 2 children who had been coerced into fabricating the claims by a relative. And this would send at least 26 people to jail in interrelated convictions, despite lack of any corroborative physical evidence of any kind. Nearly all of those convictions have been since overturned, including one man who served 20 years of a 40-year sentence. And
you said nearly all of them, so not all of them.
yeah, of those two parents who were sentenced to 240 years in prison after their own sons were coached to accuse them of abuse.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Among them, this would just spiral out of control. The McMartin trial, which became and remains the largest, longest, and most expensive trial in California history. In 1983, one parent accused one of the staff members at the McMartin preschool in Manhattan Beach, California, of abuse. During the investigation, police allowed an unlicensed psychotherapist named Key McFarland to conduct examinations of 400 children who attended the daycare. And McFarland famously used anatomically correct dolls and coercive interview processes, resulting in a staggering 321 counts of child abuse leveled against 7 daycare staff members by 41 children. And again, folks, I am reading and speaking from this Vox article, which I have linked. It just summarizes a lot of the research that I've been putting together. So why write it twice? You know, you could read a lot more in detail on that. But the McMartin preschool building was razed to the ground in 1990, just decimated and burned. So it has been thoroughly debunked.
So the preschool won the trial, but they still had the place burned down and shut down. Because it's been debunked that
it's not so much that happened. They won. It's just that over so long of a time, it was finally overturned. But I guess what do you classify as winning? Everyone's lives have been destroyed by this point. And memories have been implanted. False memories have been implanted in so many people. And around that still continues to this day around some. So, and communities and ramifications around that. You get accused of child abuse in that way, sexual child abuse, and it doesn't matter if you did it or not. At that point, it's over.
Out there.
It's over. Doesn't matter what's true and what isn't. It's at this point.
I mean, it matters a little bit. It absolutely matters to
I mean, in the long run,
and
yeah,
those who are being abused. But I get it. So even
but
if
you have that mark against you. People will hear your name and automatically associate that.
Yeah.
With you.
Yeah.
I guess what I mean is, for those who didn't do it, which turns out is all of them. But I mean, going back to William of Norwich, right? The boy in the blood libel story who was murdered. It's thought that the real story of probably what happened is that he was a victim of a pedophile in the local community, and it was used as a cover-up. Easy scapegoat. And I think that's kind of where a lot of these stories probably happen, is couldn't possibly be, you know? But I think it just astounds me that the power of suggestion and coercion can be so potent that it changes your entire world when it is entirely fabricated. Wizard's first rule on that one, that frightens the hell out of me.
For sure, right?
You know?
Being careful what is said and what is heard and how it's heard.
Yeah. So the article goes on and talks about kind of the history of how these trials panned out and things were overturned and that sort of thing. But it is the sad part of the Satanic Panic situation is that it never really ended. It's like it went underground and people sort of forgot about it for a little while. And now it's, starting to come up. And there are people to this day in and around those communities, or maybe even just, know of it, who are convinced that it did happen and that the media now, or, figures in the higher ups and corporations and politicians are trying to cover it all up and trying to, it just continues to build. This conspiracy still lives. Which brings us to QAnon.
This is where I'm going to jump in. So, I was nodding along with you, Donna, while I was sitting here on mute, because straight up to the exact conspiracies that you're talking about, the first thing that came up for me when I was looking at it was Pizzagate. Pizzagate was a conspiracy that happened when it was in 2016. It was a big presidential election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump and his MAGA followers pushed a lot by not only the people on his actual campaign staff, but Donald Trump himself had a bunch of conspiracy theories. And so it was kind of prevalent in his role in his campaign. And right after he lost the election, there was even more vitriol that was tossed around at Hillary Clinton, who she was. And he didn't lose the election, but he was about to. And one of the biggest things that they were clamoring on Hillary Clinton about was the fact that there was all these emails that were out there. And so arguably one of the reasons, or the greatest reason, that Hillary Clinton lost the election — she didn't lose the election, that she lost the electoral votes, let's be clear on that, she won by a lot — was she had a representative who was working with her, an assistant named John Podesta. And there was an investigation regarding classified files that Hillary had. And there was, if you guys both recall, there was a whole question about her emails. Where's the emails? Because they felt like all these documents were lost. Well, a laptop was found, an old work laptop that John Podesta had. And inside the laptop, there was a bunch of emails. And so the FBI made note of it, and they started going through information. And this is 24-hour news on 7 different channels right now, where everyone's looking for any type of drip of a drop of an update. Nothing is important. Nothing is interesting. And there's so many other things happening in the world, but this became a big deal. Well, in all of these stupid emails, by which, by the way, they found nothing. It was just dumb emails for work. Like there was no actual conspiracy information in there. But people still wanted there to be. They wanted so badly for something to be in there. And
Wizard's first rule.
What's that?
Wizard's first rule.
Wizard's first rule again, right? It did it again.
We want it. We want it.
We want it so bad. And so it was determined by some conspiracy theorists on 4chan and a couple of other places that he was talking about pizza that he liked, and he would go and get cheese pizza from a place called Comet Ping Pong, and it was great pizza. He talked about going to it with his family and whatnot, and they decided that it was code. And what the code meant...
Because who would go to a pizza joint with their family?
Why would you go to Comet Ping Pong and love cheese pizza? Cheese pizza must mean, and this is true, they thought it meant child pornography. And that's what cheese pizza translated to, is child pornography and child trafficking. And they believed that this child human trafficking and child pornography happened in the basement of Comet Ping Pong in Washington, D.C. And so that was this bizarre lie that was spread around, and that was tossed out there. And it was forwarded and continued to be pressed and processed and shared on Twitter and a couple other places. And it upset a lot of people, including a guy named Edgar Welch, who lived in North Carolina. And Edgar felt like he needed to be the one to do something about it. He felt that someone had to save the children. That was his deal. That was his mindset. So one day, down in December, 2016, he drove. So this is after Trump has already won the election, but he still needs to go save the kids. And so he decided to load up his truck with an AR-15 and a pistol and drove from North Carolina to Washington, D.C. to, how did he put it? He literally said that he was possibly going to sacrifice few for the greater good.
Yeah.
He's going to go save the kids. And so he goes into Comet Ping Pong and brandishes his gun, points it at employees, actually shoots a lock in a closet because he believed that that was the doorway.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, Comet Ping Pong doesn't even have a basement. There is no basement in this pizza joint. It is a flat level area in Washington, D.C. So what he thought was the door, when they're like, there's nothing here, he shot the lock out. He actually broke a computer and pointed the gun at another employee. Eventually they all evacuated and got all out. But like he realized later on that according to him, some of his information may not have been 100% legit.
Oh, Jesus.
And that's what he said when he dropped his guns to the ground and was arrested. Turns out, this is kind of an extra fun fact, he was convicted for 4 years in prison by Judge Ketanji Jackson, which I just thought was super cool. They're like, hey, I know that name. That the U.S. District Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson was the one who indicated that his actions literally left psychological wreckage.
Oh, wow.
And one of the reasons that he was arrested. But here's the deal. Here's how conspiracy theories work, y'all. You can't lose.
Right.
That's not how it's going to go. So there had to be some way of spinning it. And back on those forums, back on that 4chan, the conspiracy started to happen again from all of these followers, where they would go into and talk about it must have been a setup. That guy wasn't actually one of ours. He was one of theirs.
Of course.
So, of course, he wouldn't find anything because he was planted by the deep state and the Hollywood Democratic Party, because the thing kept growing while he's in prison. In his mind, it's done, right?
Yeah.
He was wrong. It was over. But in 4chan, this person who called themselves Q,
right,
would leave what he called Q, or what they called Q drops. And that person said, I'm an insider within the government. And here's what actually happened. That pizza place is not just human trafficking and child pornography. It's actually where they drain children's blood, because they give it to, and I quote here, Hollywood elites and the deep state, where they, in the Democratic Party and the Hollywood people, will drink the children's blood.
Yeah.
And have sexual ritualistic acts or satanic ritualistic abuse with them, to keep themselves young.
Yep.
Oh my God.
And that is part of how they keep going. And that was still spread. One thing I just want to bring up real quick. I know you have a statement, Don. This all happened on the internet. This was 4chan. It later on got moved onto 8chan. And that sounds dumb, but one of the things that we've learned about the internet over the past 20 years is that it stays. We can trace all of this.
It's forever.
Right? This infamous Q person who says that they were this alleged insider in the government. Nope. We found out who they are. There's actually an entire team here. There's a linguistics group who let me find this quote here real quick. The QAnon group. Yeah, we have exactly the account of the people that shared, and the idea of I don't need to go into all the language, but Q decided that the best way to spread this information would be to have bakers and crumbs. And he was using YouTube influencers and social makers to help spread the information around and to get all of it out there and to get it going. What we came up with and what was learned was that there were two different teams of forensic linguists that used machine learning and AI learning, because we have computers to do it now. And they actually analyzed all of these Q drops, these thousands of pieces of information, and determined that the QAnon, the person here, was most likely the work of a South African software engineer named Paul Ferber. And then...
Oh, Paul.
when it was later on decided that was Paul, it got switched over to Ron Watkins, who was an expatriate that lives in the Philippines, and he's been kind of toying with these two social medias anyway. Like, he went to 4chan and he started 8chan. That was his thing. Neither of them have actual access to classified information. They both use the language and were very well versed in the particular types of language that was determined inside the thing. But it's all fake. It's all fake still. It's 100% made up. And when friggin' Edward Welch, he's out now, by the way. He was in for 4 years and he's out. Like, he comes out of prison and people in his hometown are coming to him and they're like, did you know, or did you find out? And his mind was blown. He's like, oh, this is like, he's better. He's away from the conspiracy news. And he's told him, he's like, this isn't right. This is wrong. And he just kind of wants his life back, apparently. But
I was just reading that he was getting a bunch. I don't know if it's the same guy, but I guess the founder of 8chan, or 8chan in general as a company, is getting death threats and hate and just like violence and whatnot for going after QAnon conspiracists.
Nice. Because they're coming over with the facts and they're like, hey, that's not a real thing. So yeah. How dare you?
So they're getting challenged for trying to take down QAnon. Yeah. The thing I was going to say is not just drinking the kid's blood and whatnot, but they're specifically looking for adrenochrome. That is an element contained, which also I think, I didn't look this up. We should do that now. Adrenochrome sounds like a bad 80s movie, and it might be. It might be. Is supposedly an element that is contained in only children's blood and is intensified during these terrible abuses that happen. So in order to cultivate and maximize this particular element that will keep them young
oh my God.
And extend their lifespan. That's again. So, and then with the satanic ritual abuse, right? It was attacking the children for dark, nefarious purposes. It was never really sort of brought out what the effect of that was supposed to be, other than it was enough in the 80s that it was just for Satan.
Yeah.
It could have been for any number of things, but it was clear that they needed the kids' blood and that they needed to kill kids and do terrible things to them, because it's the whole attacking mom who's going to work. It's punishing mom for going to work. It's intensifying the stranger danger. Do you know where your kids are, who your kids are with and that sort of thing. Meanwhile, as I'm growing up, we just left the house as kids.
Yeah.
We just got on our bikes and left and went where we wanted. Didn't tell mom, it wasn't a thing. I couldn't even imagine doing that today.
Yeah,
but
not at all.
It's a weird dichotomy living back then. But
right, the weird set of everyone's so afraid of where you are, what you're going to be, and how to take care of the kids, and at the same time, kids are just taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
Right. The idea of latchkey kids and having your own keys with you for getting in and out of the house for whenever you needed it.
Well, that's why there was all the do you know where your kids are? Because they were by themselves and who the hell knows where they are?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So these conspiracies, I hope that you can see it's the variation of the same story. It's the same weird alienizing this other group, the enemy group, whatever it is, and making them not human in some ways, or less than human, or whatnot, and inventing stories that you either want to be true or too terrified could be true. And those are going to be based on the universal fear that every parent has around their children, where you want to protect the children. You want to have a stable home And anywhere that you can attack those structures when society has varied out from that, you know. So one thing that didn't come up is Christianity. When they were starting back in the, you know, 1st century, 2nd century CE, when the world was still pagan, the pagans accused Christians of ritually killing children. This is not a new conspiracy because the Christians were a weird group of people that
rejected gods, right?
We went over that.
So pagans were othering Christians.
That's right.
And
the easiest way to other is to go after protecting your kids.
Yeah.
And that they were going to attack them.
I think the wizard's first rule is the best conclusion or a way to wrap this whole topic up, and kind of gets really at the source of what my fear / morbid interest is in these reality shaping stories. It's not just reality shaping, but it is it's enough that it drives people to do extreme things that are based on lies, that are perceived to be true, even in the face of cold, hard facts.
Yeah, exactly.
And in the blood libel, it's, you know, this group of people who keep to themselves. They don't want to accept your God. They want to do their weird things that aren't what we do. And so they must be after our children for some reason, because they seem so afraid all the time, or so worried, and they worry about all these different things. And so they must be melancholic, right? But this terrible thing happened to a kid.
We know it's going to be them. We know it's the weird ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which plays into the classic Satan story, or the scapegoat, right? We talked about that on the other podcast.
Right.
That was Azazel. Is Azazel the scapegoat? No, it wasn't Azazel. It was...
No, it's one of the big names of Samael.
Samael.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Tune in next episode when we actually talk about the scapegoat.
We'll remember everything.
We'll remember it then. Hey, you know what? If the research isn't in front of us, it's behind us, right? So that wraps it up for us, folks. That is the Satanic Panic and the blood libel and the QAnon. To me, it seems very clear it's the same story. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No, I'd agree. I think it's the same. It's a repeated version of the same topic over and over again, all the way down to the exact details. It's just ridiculous and so easy as a parent to get caught up in. Like you were saying, Don, like I wouldn't let my kids just go anywhere. I did not ever experience stranger danger. Growing up as a child in the 80s when it was all big everywhere, never met any strangers. Never was introduced to any white vans. Never had had any occurrence of that. The fear was there, though, and it still permeates around me. It's still palpable out there. It's just the fear is so common that we're gonna hurt our kids, or we're gonna lose them one way or another. So it's easy to believe things that will feed that fear.
Totally.
And I mean, this guy believed that terrible, horrible things were happening to children in this pizza parlor.
Yeah.
So
not even his kids.
He's going to go in there and try and stop that. And maybe there's going to be loss of life, but he's going to try and save these kids. I mean,
and by traumatizing them in the process, but sure.
Well, I mean, there's that too. I mean, there's that part of it. But, you know, at that point, they're probably, you know, in his mind, they're already traumatized beyond. It's like such a classic story that is just still relevant today. I don't know what kind of moral or thought we can generate out of that. But food for thought. This story has been around for a long time. It has the characters change, maybe some of the elements change, but it seems to be the whole go for your kids thing. So,
and it's always false.
That's
the moral that I would take away with this. That yes, the fears are there, but the reality isn't. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I grew up with stranger danger, never had an issue with it, never was around strangers. I will add into the fact that I am a cis white male who grew up in a suburban neighborhood. I have privilege on top of privilege on top of privilege. The fear was still there, but like even for my friends who did not have the experience that I did, it wasn't real. It didn't happen.
That said, there are cults. There are violent people doing horrible, horrible things. And those things do happen. 2 children. Yeah. I mean, it's not like stories like this don't exist, but it's not in this story. It's not out of these conspiracies. So anyway, just wanted to say, not to discredit the actual real things that did occur, that have occurred, just isn't necessarily connected to what we're talking about.
The devil. It's not connected to the devil or Satan or Satanism.
Or some of it is. Frankly, some of it, there can be. But that doesn't mean it's this widespread, infiltrated, at all levels society kind of thing,
Yeah.
In Martinsville, in Saskatchewan, the threat was there was a whole bunch of cultists that were going to raid this town and burned the town to the ground at the eve of this night. And the local law enforcement were all up in – they had Mounties and stuff. Like, they were ready for an all-out assault. Nothing happened. Ever.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you all for listening. Tune in soon. We are going to talk about who is the Sataniest of all the Satans from a fun bracket of, I believe it is 16 and a half Satans.
And a half.
So tune into that, and we will catch you then. Remembering that the devil you don't know is the devil someone else does.
This has been The Devil You Don't Know. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Hey listener, if you're enjoying our show, please consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/thedevilpodcast. That's where you'll get episodes first, bonus content, and join our Discord server and be a part of the conversation. Thank you for an amazing first year, and we are so excited for more to come.